Dr. Paul Twigg is the Associate Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences and Professor of Biology. He approached me early on this year and said, I understand that Charlie Bicak may speak, and instead of you introducing him, could I do that? And I think that was a great gesture. It's my privilege at this point to introduce to you Dr. Paul Twigg. Paul?
I'm not sure if Charlie knew I was coming to do this, but surprised if he didn't. When I asked the chancellor about the opportunity to do this, I thought a lot about sort of why I wanted to do it, to be able to recognize Charlie, but also because I think more than anything else, I love this place. And when I say this place, I don't mean this room and the fabulous new jumbotron that we've got that shows me in terrifyingly high definition and makes me sound a bit like perhaps the most interesting loper in the world. You know, stay thirsty, my lopers, if you will. But it does remind me that this place would have something in common with that. That is to say, I bet if I asked you folks in the crowd to raise your hand how many of you had been athletes, that a lot of you would do it. And if I asked you similarly to raise your hand if you had had that one coach who had transformed your life and made you believe that you were capable of more things than you ever believed you could, that you'd know what I was talking about when I introduced Dr. Bicak this morning. So if I go back, and I won't make this story too long, I was 26 years old when I got here. I'm not even close to that anymore. But one of the first people I met was Dr. Bicak when he helped me unload my truck when I moved to town, already demonstrating to me what Loper family was already about. During that time, or since that time, I taught classes with him. Not that many people can say that. I know Peter can, but not that many else. I taught classes with him. He became my chair. Eventually, he came back to be our campus leader. And I think more than anything else that if you're sitting in this room, whether you know it or not, Dr. Bicak has transformed your lives. In that, I also have personal connections with him. I know I saw his wife Marilyn and his son Nathan coming in today. I don't know where they are. Oh, yeah, there they are. I have connections also with his daughter Libby, who I would scare regularly and send running down the hallway looking for Charlie when he was a faculty member in my department. My connection to Nathan he's now a faculty member at UNL and tenured himself. Was that once when he was a young man, he had a large cache of punk rock CDs stolen out of his car, and I helped him to copy all of them so that he could have them back. So I've had lots of connections with the family. You still got them? You're probably on streaming now, I'm assuming, right? But in any case, Charlie has, at least for me, made my life so much more better than perhaps I could have thought it would have been. And before I introduce him and allow him to refute everything I perhaps just said, that I need to recognize the fact that also sitting in the front row today is my wife, Janet Steele, who I've met since I've been here. It's also our anniversary today, so if you'd like to help me wish her an happy anniversary, I'd appreciate your help. Okay, so with that, I'm going to get out of your way and introduce my friend and mentor, Dr. Charlie Bicak.
Oh, my goodness. Thank you, Paul. Quite the introduction. Chancellor Christensen, President Carter, Executive Vice President Provost Gold, our regents, Kenny, Ferris, Pillen, Claire, thank you all for being here this morning. And our graduates, congratulations. What a wonderful day. You know, everyone offers congratulations. And then right on the heels of that, most everyone will ask, as Nate mentioned earlier, now what are you going to do, right? Well, count me among you. On June 30th, I'll be retiring from this fine institution. People offer congratulations even when you're on the brink of retirement and then ask, well, now what are you going to do? Well, the reality is we're asked that question by others throughout our lives. And if you're like me, that question lingers within you on a daily basis. And also, if you're like me, then you have a bit of doubt regarding life's big questions. So if you'll indulge me for just a bit, I'm going to be personal in my remarks this morning. And graduates, I'll let you in on a little secret. Oh, goodness. I'll let all 6,000 of you in on a little secret this morning. You see, I've always carried some doubt about my abilities, some apprehension about what I could accomplish. I was never certain that I would finish a college degree, let alone a master's degree, a PhD. I was never certain I could make the grade when I taught middle school, 7th grade physical science, junior high back in the day, or when I worked in pharmaceuticals for Eli Lilly, or when I was a first-time assistant professor at one of the Cal State campuses in California. Speaking of which, I remember a call from the chair of the Department of Biology from Cal State when I was working for Eli Lilly in Elanco Range Products, a subsidiary of the company. Don't get me started on the corporate structure in pharmaceuticals, but at that time, I really was interested in being a teacher, you see, so I thought, well, this is a fine experience, it's an excellent research opportunity, but I really would like to return to the classroom. So at that time, I was setting up field research test plots, and I think I was probably in a motel in some place like Leadville, Colorado. And this was before the internet, and when David Oast, the chair of that Department of Biology in California, gave me a call, he asked what I knew about the Cal State campus. I said, not very much. Regardless, I was granted an interview, flew out, and was offered the job. I was ecstatic until I was driving with my patient and devoted spouse, Marilyn, and young family on the move to Bakersfield. I recalled a key question I'd been asked during the interview process. Could I head up an agricultural biology program? I said, oh, sure, I can do that. Who doesn't say things like that during the interview process? So during that drive across the Mojave Desert from Colorado to Central California, my anxiety ratcheted up. Could I really do this? Granted, my master's degree was in an ag college and my PhD was in natural resources, but I knew about rangelands and perhaps a little bit about corn and cattle. What did I know about citrus, table grapes, cotton, or say 40 acres of asparagus or kumquats, the remarkable diversity of commodities across Central California? So that first summer, we were in the San Joaquin Valley. I hired on as a table grape inspector for Kern County. I learned much about table grapes and other commodities. I also learned much about the land and the people on the land, including the migrant crews that ventured from Latin America and South America along with Mexico. What a remarkable learning experience that was. Talk about increasing one breadth of understanding of the world around you and the people around you. So back to that big question, what are you going to do? Be it all of you on the cusp of graduation, and I promise it's going to be in a few minutes. Don't worry. Or in my case, retirement itself. I think the question is answered in the way we live our lives, both professionally and personally. It's answered in how we regularly address life's big questions. Who am I? What do I want to do with my life? What obligations do I have to others? How should I live my life? Well, I struggled with how I might approach these questions in a commencement address today. You see, if this were just another among the nearly 100 commencements I've attended, with more to follow, I might simply provide some sage advice and quickly take my seat. By my calculation, this is my 75th commencement at UNK. I did the calculation 3 or 4 times. Could that be right? Of the many I've attended, could it be at 75? I believe it is. So I'm so happy to be with all of you. This time, this commencement is different. This is the beginning of the end, or perhaps I should say it more positively. It's closure followed by a new beginning. When people ask me, what do you do? I'm rather tempted to say, well, it kind of depends on the circumstances. I can't take credit for that, for that line. It was uttered by the actor Michael Keaton in the movie Dream Team about 30 years ago. But I do tell people I teach. So that's what I do. I teach. Many of you know me as an administrator. True enough, However, by the time I retire on June 30th, I will still have been a faculty member more years than I've been a dean or a vice chancellor. I say this less to discount my years as administrator, but rather more to underscore my roots. With that in mind, I'd like to reflect just a bit on life's big questions in the context of teaching. First, I should now acknowledge that I'm a slow learner. I've come and gone from this wonderful institution 2 or 3 times, depending on how you count. I was a student at Kearney State College, having graduated in 1974 with a teaching endorsement in biology. Now, every era has its trials and tribulations, its challenges. The Vietnam War, for example, loomed over my college days in the early 1970s. However, I drew a draft number of 280 in 1972, a time when conscription went only as high as number 125. So I never fought in a war. There was no COVID. This is something you all have endured. None of you have escaped the impact of the pandemic. And I so admire your perseverance and am indeed inspired by you in this regard. By contrast, in 1974, I freely embarked on my career. I taught for a brief time in the Westside District, District 66 in Omaha, did a master's degree in Vancouver, British Columbia, a PhD in Fort Collins, Colorado. I taught that 9 years in the Cal State system in Bakersfield, and then returned to Kearney at UNK in 1992. Again, being that slow learner, I left in 2005 and was a dean at St. Edward's University, a private institution in Austin, Texas. I was lucky enough, thank you, Chancellor Christensen, Doug, to allow me to come back. I had the opportunity to return to Kearney in my current position in 2009. There's a certain attraction to this place called UNK that is genuine and special. I tell you all this only to underscore that for me, the beginning and the end have become one and the same. The last 13 years at UNK have been a return to my roots in Kearney State College. That said, there are some commonalities I've discovered among those who have mentored me and the students I've mentored. So I've plucked some examples from the last few decades that I'd just like to share with you in a few minutes. Both someone who I consider as influential mentor to me and students for whom I've served as a mentor. So as I describe my path a little bit this morning, I'd have you think about similar people in your lives who were influential in your journey to this arena this morning. I have to start with my mother, Iris. She continues to be an inspiration to me at 97 years of age. We all have special people in our lives that have been so important to our success. In fact, I'll bet you all know where your family and friends are seated in this arena, right? Let's take a moment, stand up, you know where they are, point to them and give them a round of applause. Your parents, your family, stand up and do so. They're all here for you today, no question about that. Thank you. If you'd indulge me a bit more as I reflect on my family, my father, Laddie, taught on this campus for 27 years, having retired in 1989. As Paul, Dr. Twigg mentioned, son Nathan Bicak is on the faculty in the College of Architecture in UNL. I learned the value of hard work and perseverance from my dad. I also actually learned that from my daughter, Libby, a high school swimmer and collegiate rower. I acquired a great appreciation for creativity and collaboration from my son, and I mostly learned that to be handy with a hammer and a saw skips a generation. I am the skip generation. I was a newly minted assistant professor at Cal State Bakersfield in that fall of 1983, and I was fortunate to be taken under the wing of the chair of the department, that fellow named David Ost. David once said to me about 4 p.m. on a Friday afternoon, he said, "Charlie, when you're tired and ready to quit for the day, do a little more." Just a single comment, but it stayed with me for years. I had a student at that Cal State campus named Danny Sternberg. Danny was from Israel. He'd been conscripted and served the 2 required years in the Army, as do all young people in the country. He'd only been in the U.S. a short time before enrolling at Cal State. While not bad, he worked on his English with a vengeance. I invited him to work with me on a planned ecology project, and he excelled. He was a young man with innate intelligence, high work ethic, and a very personable demeanor, a real trifecta in attributes. What I remember most was his comment after a long, hot day in the field, "Dr. Bicak, I feel so lucky to be in America, in college, and to be working on a biology project. This is good." That made an impression on me, had staying power, and again, just a single comment, but one that I remember well and one that stays with me. I'm lucky, so fortunate to see that set of attributes in all of you, that innate intelligence, high work ethic, personable, open nature. These are attributes that will serve you well, graduating class of 2022. I was lucky and had the opportunity to return to my alma mater in 1992. I had a fine mentor, a fellow named Marvin Williams, who served a couple of stints as chair of the Department of Biology, and I learned much from Marv. I remember Marv clearly saying to me, "Charlie, keep your eyes and ears open, listen to and learn from others. Don't be anxious to speak. One's time to do so invariably arises in a conversation or a meeting. Speak when the moment is right." And again, this was just a brief, casual conversation one day, but it stayed with me all these years. Had real staying power. I had a student here in the early years of my time at UNK named Troy Walls. Troy was from a ranch in Arthur County, about 20 miles north of the town of Arthur. Troy was interested in rangeland condition, and that also happened to be an interest area of mine. So we undertook a research project together. I remember once Troy said to me, "Dr. Bicak, I really think you ought to be more interested in yucca." Yucca, another common name, soapweed. And I asked him why, and he said, "Well, because you aren't." And I said, "You aren't?" Well, you probably have to have a little more information to understand how profound that statement was, but suffice to say it has always stayed with me as a reminder to keep an open mind to expand my interests, because I wasn't. I ought to be. Not in all things, but in a judicious way. And I've learned from you, the class of 2022, during these COVID years. I'm in awe of the manner in which you've learned, you've endured, and you indeed have risen above the pandemic challenges that have been in front of you. Remember I said I was a slow learner? Yeah, I am. Well, we left UNK in Kearney in 2005 after having returned and moved to Austin, Texas. Now, the slow learner part of me is not about Austin, nor was it about my dean's experience at St. Edward's University. That was all wonderful. I liked it very much. However, there are more people in the greater Austin area than in the entire state of Nebraska, 2 million plus, and they're all out on I-35 at 7 a.m. Quality of life, I don't miss that element at that institution, that community. Sister Donna Jurek, this private institution, was my provost, and I learned much from her. But above all, I think I learned to be fearless, but not foolishly so. As an administrator, I know I must make periodically difficult decisions that cause rancor among some members of the campus community. Imagine that, making a decision that causes rancor among some folks on campus. As I glance at the faculty. So these things happen, but one has to make decisions. Sometimes they're not particularly popular decisions. In making decisions, one should be discerning and judicious, and I recall, even at that time as a dean, teaching a general education course. I thoroughly enjoyed that and worked with a cohort of students, also including my daughter Libby, who led the development of the club rowing team on the St. Edward's campus. Along with her teammates, Kat, Blake, Julio, and others, they competed with the best of teams across the South and Midwest. And I admired the collective resolve of the group. I had many of them in class, and it impressed me to know that by the time they came to my 8 a.m. class, they had been up at least 3 hours, and probably at least 2 of those hours had been on the water. Perhaps the greatest lesson I learned from the students in the rowing club is the importance of paying attention to your own physical and mental health. Paying attention to your own physical and mental health. You can only help others if you help yourselves. Take care of yourself. There's an old idiom in sailing, take care of the boat and the boat will take care of you. That's so important. So over the last 13 years, and I promise I'm close to finished. So over the last 13 years at UNK, I've continued to be mentored by, frankly, all of you as students, faculty, and staff. Chancellor Christensen, Doug, I've watched you over the years and learned that important lesson in life. Don't get too high, don't get too low. Perhaps said another way, nothing is quite as good as it may seem, nor perhaps as bad as it may seem. So I continue to be genuinely inspired by all of you, students from across campus. The richness of your backgrounds and experiences is phenomenal. Just as you all represent the range of academic majors from across this campus this morning, you also embody the remarkable diversity of our society. This is in the form of campus organizations in which you participate, the events you attend, the ways in which you volunteer for the betterment of our community, and indeed, the ways in which you make our world a better place. I attended the most recent Student Research Day on our campus not long ago. Is it any wonder that we are regional leader in experiential learning? You have all owned your learning, have internalized it. And faculty, my colleagues, you have inspired me over the years. The creativity that emerges from all of you is simply remarkable. This creativity in turn inspires our students, our graduates. And I'm reminded of a quote by Arthur Koestler, famed author and journalist throughout the 20th century. Koestler said, quote, "Creativity is a type of learning process where the teacher and pupil are located in the same individual." End quote. One and the same. So my advice this morning, go forth and be creative. I leave you this morning with a quote from our recently elected student body president, Ms. Emily Sadi. In her inauguration speech, Emily earlier this spring said, quote, "By welcoming me, you have taught me the importance of creating a culture of inclusion and belonging for all students that call our campus home," end quote. I could not agree more. This will always be my home, and I expect yours, graduates, as well. What a remarkable privilege I have had to serve this campus. What more can one ask than to make a difference in life, and to do so in an arena like this? Thank you.